Hello, it's Bob Baker here. Welcome to episode 17 of The Creative Entrepreneur. I think you're going to really like this one, my interview with Laurel Staples. She is a photographer. It's one of the creative things that she does, but she's also the host of the Go Fire Yourself podcast, which is a podcast similar to this one, all about pursuing your dreams and not having to settle for a traditional work, life, or job. And so I know you're going to really enjoy what Laurel has to say. It's very inspiring. Before we jump into that, I just want to encourage you to let me know what you think of the podcast. I'd like to interact with you. And there are a couple different ways that you can leave comments or feedback. If you're watching the video version of the interview on YouTube, you can post a comment below right on YouTube. An even better way is to go to the interview page at DIYcareermanifesto.com and leave a comment there, sort of like a blog post. In both cases, it won't show up right away. I need to approve them just to cut down on the spam and the nonsense that sometimes gets posted. But I will approve legitimate comments, as I'm sure yours will be. And while you're at DIYcareermanifesto.com, please sign up for the VIP email list, and I'll let you know every time I post a new interview. And also give you a free sample of my new book called The DIY Career Manifesto. So all kinds of goodies for you there. In addition, please share the link. There should be share links on YouTube. There's share links on my website for all of the interviews. So spread it around. If you have someone who you think could be inspired by these interviews or this particular one, please let them know about it. Let's not keep it to ourselves. Okay, you ready? Let's get on to that interview with Laurel Staples. Welcome to another episode of The Creative Entrepreneur. Bob Baker here with a very cool guest. There on the other end of the line there is Laurel Staples. Hi, Laurel. How are you?
Hey, Bob. I'm doing great. How are you?
Fantastic. I know we just met really just recently, I think back in September in Nashville. There was a meetup there, and we met for the first time. And you invited me to be on your podcast, which is called Go Fire Yourself, right?
Yes, Go Fire Yourself. And you were an amazing guest, my friend.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed that. And that title of that, almost have to slow down because if I say the title of your podcast too quickly, you could blurt out some obscenity perhaps.
You could. It was supposed to be kind of amusing, but I think it kind of catches people's interest because they're like, "Oh, go fire yourself? Okay, that's different."
But it was a perfect. I mean, so here we are. Obviously, I'm returning the favor and interviewing you, but we obviously are on similar missions because I assume the whole idea behind your podcast and that title, Go Fire Yourself, is to fire yourself, I guess, from your day job to pursue something. Yeah, but I want you to explain what that title means and what your podcast is dedicated to. And then we'll talk about what you do for a living and all that good stuff. But while we're on that.
Well, you're exactly right. Go Fire Yourself is about really taking control of your life, your business, and saying goodbye to your day job forever. And that's why you were a perfect guest for the show, because you quit your job years ago and you've always been doing your own thing, but you said goodbye to the day job a long time ago. And that's really what the podcast and the blog is all about, is helping people escape their day job, grow a successful business, and just live life on their own terms. And it's giving them the tools and the tips and the interviews and the inspiration and everything that they need to do that and to make that leap, because that's a big hurdle for people. And I'm sure we'll talk about this, when I quit my job, I just didn't feel like there were a lot of resources out there. So I wanted to create this kind of one-stop shop for people who want to quit their job and go out on their own.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a long ingrained, I guess, history of having that day job and actually I was reading somewhere or listening to maybe somebody else's podcast, I'm not sure, about this whole idea of the day job is actually part of the Industrial Revolution or something, like prior to like 100 years ago or so, in more rural times. I think that this wasn't the case. I think most people actually were self-employed, maybe working on their farms or whatever. I'm not sure, but it was fascinating to go through the history of employment as we know it in this kind of structured hourly type of gig, right?
Well, it's interesting because I just don't think humans are meant to sit in a cubicle for just 8 to 5, 8 to 5 every day, which is how my job was when I worked a corporate job.
Same here.
And we're not cattle. We're not meant to work like that. And I feel like we're being creative people, even if you don't feel like you're creative, I mean, just being a human, being a person, having ideas, and you're stuck in this environment and you're wondering why you're unhappy. Well, it's the environment that's making you
Right.
that way. And it's kind of this whole illusion around you that a lot of people are buying into. And my thing, and I think your thing too, Bob, is you don't have to buy into that
Right.
anymore. That's like the old system, the old way. And we're coming into the new way of you can take your talents, like the DIY manifesto, take your talents, take your know how, turn it into a business and work for yourself.
Absolutely, we're on the same page, girlfriend.
Exactly.
That's awesome. And also I noticed that our two podcasts. I recently, even though these have been a video podcast since or a video interview series since June, I only in recent last several weeks converted the audio, pulled the audio out of them, and started posting them as audio podcasts. Submitted to the iTunes store. And both of our shows have been showing up in the new and notable in the business category, and more specifically the business careers category. So it always makes me smile when I check iTunes and see my standings, and we're usually somewhere in that same row or two.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And I saw you took a screen capture of it and put it on Twitter. And I saw yours and mine on the new
Yeah.
and noteworthy section. I was like, yes,
Yes,
because I
indeed.
think this is what people care about now. And people are going in this direction and giving them content that's going to help them do what they want to do and realize their dreams and go in that right direction I mean, it's what's going to be popular. So I love to see that.
Awesome. Me too. So you mentioned a little bit ago that about you quitting your job, and so actually, even though we've been talking about you as a podcast host, but you make a living as a photographer, and I think more specifically, kind of in the music realm, which is of course what I've been doing for a long time. But tell people about what you do there, how you got into that, real quick, and then we'll get into our little list of
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah, I'd love to. I have an interesting journey, and I'm just going to go over it really fast because there's a lot that's happened since I quit my job. I started out as a mechanical engineer, graduated college, engineering degree, went directly into the corporate world. I was having resistance about it at the time, and rightly so. I was not a good fit for the corporate world. I got in there. I was miserable. A lot of people quit their job. They're like, oh, I was okay with a job, but I'd rather work for myself. I was miserable. And so I started to plot my way back out, right? Pretty much like maybe a year after I got in. And the first business that I started after I quit my job was a retail store.
Oh wow.
It was interesting. And so I went that route and I was able to quit my job and open this retail store. I was living in Kentucky doing the job, and I came back to Nashville to open the retail store, which Nashville's my hometown. So loved coming back here and doing that. Did that about 2 years, and it just turned out just for multiple reasons. I'm not going to blame the economy, even though it started right when the recession started, but I don't really think it was that. But for multiple reasons, I decided this is not for me. It's too much overhead. I'm just meant to do something different. So I went after that, I took some time off, went into health coaching, and I became a health coach. So I worked with people who wanted to change their diet, change their lifestyle. And that was great for me because I got really good at coaching and doing the one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and just working with people really to discover their dreams in the health world.
Cool.
And I learned that what was really firing me up was when people were talking. I was getting a lot of clients that were really interested in their business and growing a business and growing a lifestyle that they loved. And so that's kind of what made me make the switch into go fire yourself. Because for years since I quit my job, this is what has lighted me up, is just to talk about business, every aspect of business, help people grow business, grow their business. So I really made that switch to go fire yourself and also to become a photographer. And I know that in the context, it doesn't sound like, where did that come from? But for me, I've always done photography from the time I was, probably in 8th grade, I started doing photography and just haven't stopped. So that point in my life was really me just honing in on, okay, who am I? What are my real talents? What do I want to do? Kind of putting aside some of these shadow careers, as Stephen Pressfield might call them, and really coming into my true self. So that's just kind of a quick overview. I don't want to hog all the time there.
No, but that's cool. And do you specialize kind of on musicians or artists in your photography?
Yeah,
Since you're
you
in
mentioned
Nashville, a
that.
music town, so I assume that
Yes.
probably helps.
That is true. Well, my talent is really in portrait photography. Like, I do really well with taking pictures, one, two people, and I'm not a wedding person and I'm not a live event person,
Right.
but I am great at taking pictures of people. And so I really started to think, okay, who do I want to help with my photography? And again, it came back to I want to help people who are trying to do their own thing. And that's musicians, it's entrepreneurs, it's real estate agents, I mean, business owners, anybody who wants to brand themselves through their imagery so that they can really take their business to the next level. So, really, what I do with my blog and what I do with my photography is very similar because it's helping people do what they love to do and helping them be more successful at it. So, I do focus on the musicians, and Nashville is a fantastic town to do that in because everyone you talk to here, every waiter, just everyone, it's like, oh, why'd you come to Nashville? And they say music.
Right.
I'm like, here's my card. There you
I'm a
go.
songwriter. I'm a singer or whatever. So that's
Exactly.
cool. There's a thread that runs throughout. I mean, I think a lot of people miss those patterns in their life too. And you mentioned photography. You've had an interest in since eighth grade, and in the DIY career manifesto that which you mentioned. I chronicle how a lot of these things that I'm doing now in my 50s go back to grade school and high school. And I think if we really pay attention, we find these patterns in our life and we find a way to, it helps us. They're clues to being who we authentically are. Would you
And I
agree?
think you're exactly right
Yeah.
because that for me is honestly when I got out of college and I had my engineering degree, I really wanted to be a photographer, but I was like, no, I don't want to turn that into a career because I'll lose my passion for it and I'll hate it. And so, no. And I kept putting photography off
Hmm.
and I kept putting it off and saying, no, that's not me. No, I'm not supposed to do that. It's not the right time. I can't make money at that.
Hmm.
And just, I mean, within the last few years, I was like, no, this is what I'm meant to do. I've been putting it off for so long, but it's what I've loved since I was a child. And you talked about this in your book and just honing in on kind of on your true calling and really what you're meant to do and what you love to do. And I heard something the other day that was like, if you turn your hobby into your business, you'll hate it. But if you turn your passion into your business, you'll love it. And so I always thought, well, I'll hate it. But it turns out I just can't get enough of it. So,
Well, good for you and the rest of us too.
yeah.
So, Laurel, that's a great overview of your background. So let's kind of jump into some of the questions that I have. And I always like to ask all my guests, if looking back on the success that you've had as a photographer and a podcaster, if you had to identify three key factors that were sort of responsible for your growth and your career status and all that, what would those be?
Well, I think that's such a great question because there are probably so many, but I'm thinking, okay, if I had to narrow it down, okay, what would I pick here? And I think the first thing is that I started. And I know that sounds so basic, like, duh, you have to start something in order to do it. But, when you're working in a job and you're getting a nice paycheck and everything, it can be really easy not to start anything. And that was one of the things that's really helped me become successful is just starting and working towards a goal and getting in a mode where you have to want what you want more than you want what you have right now.
Yeah.
And I know that's a little interesting to say, but you have to like want this future for yourself more than you want your current situation. And that means you have to start building on something and you have to start small. And that's something that I've always been able to do. And really working towards what I want and not escaping what I don't want.
Right.
So that's been something for me is focusing on, okay, I want to build this life for myself. I want to build this career. I want to be successful and not just, okay, I want to get rid of this other stuff and move away from this job. At the time, probably 6 years ago when I quit my job, maybe I wouldn't have been able to say that. But for me, when I was working a job, I did start something. I started working on my retail store probably 1 year before I quit my job.
Hmm.
And when I went, every time I've gone into something different, I just decided I'm just going to dive in. I'm just going to start, and I'm not going to let anything prevent me, because you don't know what you don't know until you get started.
Right.
So that's kind of my first.
Yeah, and I love that. It's like the vision of what you want to create in your life is stronger than, and I'm paraphrasing here, maybe putting in my own words, but it's stronger than whatever comfort level or comfort zone that you might be currently in. 'Cause that's one thing I talked about. I've talked about for years and in the DIY Career Manifesto about how it's okay to take on a part-time job or even a day job to make ends meet, because you got to have your basic financial needs met, just to be able to function. So there's nothing wrong with that, but the trick is not getting lulled into the comfort and the story that you tell yourself that this is the secure way to be with your life while you know. But yeah, and with my situation, I was frustrated. I've always been frustrated by day jobs and working for someone else, and I did use that actually to fuel me to take the action and to start taking the steps that would lead me to whatever this vision that I had no way how I was going to get there. But so frustration can be a fuel. But it's like, there's a phrase that I actually that somebody quoted or reminded me of, and it's pain pushes until vision pulls.
Ooh, I love that.
Don't you love that? Yeah, I think I heard that from Michael Beckwith. I'm not sure if he was the originator of that, but anyway, that's my little embellishment of that. There.
Well, you have such a good point, because I think comfort is killer. I don't think anyone who's really comfortable is going to take that next step and start building the life that they want because they feel cozy and comfortable. And I think it's great, if you need to get a day job to make ends meet, like, I'm not saying suffer or live in a box or anything like that,
right.
But it's when that day job that you're going to take for 6 months turns into 6 years and turns into a decade and goes beyond that. I think that's where the problem lies, is when you get really comfortable and that paycheck is just looking really good, and it just becomes too scary to take that leap, because it is a leap of faith when you quit your job, and you have to go into the unknown, and that comfort zone that you're in, it's going to keep you walled in. And I think that's when it gets really scary for people.
Absolutely. So starting is number one. What's another key factor there for you?
Another thing for me is I was fortunate to grow up in a family where, my family is very supportive. They always believed in me. None of them are entrepreneurs, so they didn't really understand what I was doing, but they tried their best to be supportive of it. So I grew up always believing in myself.
Oh, wow.
Like, I always had the belief that I could do something. And even if you didn't grow up like that, that doesn't mean you can't cultivate that belief in your life now. Because I think that's been a really critical part of me being successful, is I believe that I can do it. Whatever it is, and it has changed so many times along the way,
Right.
But just knowing that I'm going to be able to learn what I need to learn, to figure out what I need to figure out, to take that next step, to do the next thing, and being open to that knowledge and being a learner and experimenter along the way. So I think it's Henry Ford, of course, that said the quote, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Right.
So I think for me, it's thinking I can just the whole time, which is, no matter what I go into, and no matter if I do photography for the rest of my life or if I don't, whatever I do next, if I think I can do it, it's going to work out in the end for me.
That's cool. I've said, like, what the biggest obstacles that we all face are not exterior circumstances or whatever, they're internal. They're the stories we tell ourselves, and confidence and self-confidence is a big part of that. And it's wonderful, and congrats to you that you seem to have always had this, or maybe whether it was instilled by your family or was in your DNA or whatever. So do you have any recommendations for people that maybe don't believe in themselves? You mentioned it can be cultivated. Do you have any tips on how to do that for people that might be lacking that confidence?
Sure. I'm a big fan of affirmations. Mm-hmm. So I believe that, you've talked about kind of stories we tell ourselves, things that go through our head. That's just kind of junk that's been playing on a record for a really long time. Mm-hmm. And I feel like affirmations are a way to just change that record. And if you can pick an affirmation, whatever it is for you, like, I know enough, I'm smart enough, people love me,
right.
Whatever that looks like for you, and just start saying it over and over again, it'll actually change. Science shows it changes your neural pathways.
Right.
And so if you start doing this, then when something comes up, you don't automatically think, oh, I don't know enough to do that. I can't do that. I'm not smart enough. Can't, don't, won't, shouldn't, all that stuff. But the new neural pathways have been built, and you're like, oh, I am smart enough. I can learn what I need to learn. I can do this. So that's my main way to cultivate a new mindset, really about anything, and just picking the affirmation that's right for you, just based on whatever you're dealing with at the time.
Right. And for me, I think the first step to overcoming that kind of negative thinking, self-doubt, or whatever, is first just the awareness of your thoughts, and like just start to monitor your thoughts. Even if you still catch yourself blurting out crap or negative things, the awareness is the first, because a lot of people just unconsciously just think those things and say those things to others, not even realizing it. But if you start to become aware of, oh wow, I do kind of downplay my talents a lot, then you can start taking steps to replace those thoughts. But without the awareness and the monitoring first, it's hard to make progress, you know?
Well, and you have such a good point there. And I didn't mention that because I try to think about my thoughts all the time. So it's kind of second nature to me. But you're right, is we're unconsciously being mean to ourselves. And I always tell people, if you were hanging out with a person in your brain right now, you wouldn't want to hang out with them anymore. You wouldn't get coffee with them because they're telling you, oh, sorry, Laurel, you suck. You're not good. You can't do this. You would just say, well, sorry, you're not my friend. But that voice is in our head all the time trying to hold us back and keep us down. And it's just that broken record. So you're exactly right. You have to become aware of what's going on in your head in order to make that change and then create that new record for yourself.
Good stuff here. So we got start, number one. We got believe in yourself, number two. The third factor for you?
The third thing for me is resilience. I think entrepreneurs, like every entrepreneur, needs to be resilient. That's just one of the main characteristics that you need to succeed, because you are going to make mistakes and you are going to fail. And if you don't, it's because you're not out there enough. So you have to get out there. You have to have those failures, which I don't even believe in failure. I believe in learning experiences.
Right.
So a failure is just a chance for you to learn more about yourself. But that resilience kicks in with when you fail, you get back on the horse and you get back on. And for me, when I had to close my retail store, I lost probably over $100,000 in that retail store.
Whoa.
Which is scary. I'm probably 27 at the time, and I've lost this money, and I've lost my dream, and I've lost my vision. And it took me a while. As I said, it took me about a year to figure out my next step in life, because it's really scary when you have that first failure, you fall flat on your face. But then when I got back on the horse, the next time I failed, it wasn't as hard. And the next time it wasn't as hard. So I'm kind of shrinking it from a year down to a couple months, down to a couple weeks. And like now, when something bad happens, it takes me maybe a couple hours. And I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go again. But it's cultivating that resilience over a period of time and just keep coming back to it. That's really it's helped me to get to this point, and it's going to help me from here on out. So I think that's a huge one for people.
That's right, absolutely. The old-fashioned stick-to-itiveness, persistence, and all that good stuff. Yeah, and I hate to use the word developing a thick skin, because it almost sounds like you're getting I don't know, you're becoming a curmudgeon or something, but it's not. But yeah, I think you mentioned something earlier, reminded me of, I think Tony Robbins said there are no failures, there are only results. So if you think of it that way, every time you do something, you get a result, and you can say that's bad, good, or whatever, but yeah, you're right, and you always learn from the results that you get. They may not be the result that you wanted originally, but at least you got a result. Something happened as a result of your action.
Exactly. And it's like an experimenter or a scientist. They go in the lab and they mix some chemicals. And if it doesn't turn out, they're not like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person. I'm a failure. I cannot believe that I didn't get the right reaction. You just say, okay, this combination didn't work. Let's try the next one. Let's try the next one. And I think entrepreneurs need to have this experimenter's mindset, this kind of scientific mindset of, okay, it's not a failure. It's just an attempt that didn't work, and I'm going to try the next combination. I'm going to see if that works, and reframing it and having that paradigm shift to, it's all a learning process and an essential one. So
It sounds like that should be the name of an upcoming podcast, The Experimenter's Mindset. or
yes,
a book or a workshop or something. Write that down. We'll co-host it together.
yes, that's our next plan.
This is great. All right, Laurel. So we've covered a lot about the success traits, and actually we touched on kind of a failure that you had with that store. But I always like to, I guess, along with that, I like to ask about challenges and how you overcame them. So if you could think of a business or a creative challenge that you faced and along the journey and how you overcame it, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, that's a really great question because entrepreneurs, we're faced with challenges probably all day long. I think one of my biggest challenges, and I see this happening in my businesses along the way, is I I have been working harder, not smarter. And this was something I had to change along the way because with my first couple businesses, I was working all the time, all day long. I mean, I could get up at 6 and work until I went to bed. And I think that's okay. I mean, I loved what I was doing and I loved the work. And so I felt like I was being productive, but the work I was doing was not translating to make any more money for me.
Right.
So I started to think in the past few years, like, okay, how can I work smarter and not harder? And how can I be like some other people and maybe not work 12 hours a day or 14 hours a day. Maybe I could work 8 hours a day, something like that, and do the things that are productive and do the things that make money. And so a couple years back, I decided I am only going to work on the things that make me money. Like not only because you have to do the other things as well,
Right.
but spend 75% of my time working on the activities that make me money. And so, for example, in my retail store, I would spend my days working. So, what that would look like is I would probably be on Facebook working. And I would rearrange the store and redecorate the window displays and fix the website and redesign the business cards and do all this stuff. But what I really needed was customers. And I wasn't doing anything. Like I'd put an ad in a newspaper and be like, oh, okay, that'll get me some customers. But I should have spent 75% of that time working on marketing and working on bringing people into the store, working on the PR and all of that, and hired somebody else. I had a couple different employees and interns and just make them rearrange the store or redo the website or post a product online or something like that. Stuff that doesn't need brain power, that can just be done. And I think that's what I've really learned from that challenge in my life is just work on the things that make me money, work smarter, not harder, and focus on marketing. Because it doesn't matter how good you are, how great your service is, or if your retail store is the most beautiful thing on the entire planet. None of that matters if you don't have anyone shopping, if you don't have any customers, or if you don't have any clients.
Right.
So that's something that's been a big challenge for me and that took a big paradigm shift along the way.
So is the key to doing that is a sort of related to like the 80-20 rule? Do you have to sit down and look at all the things you're doing and then determine what those profitable things are and weed out the rest? What was your process to overcome it, or what do you do now that's different, I guess?
That's a great question. What I do is I look at what has made me money in the past. So what activities have I done to get a client? Like when I was a health coach, I looked at, okay, what have I done to get clients? Okay, workshops work. This works, this doesn't work, this works, this doesn't work. And I made a list of everything that worked. And I just, instead of trying to come up with new marketing or something fancy and different, I just did over and over again what worked.
Oh, nice.
And so I think it's just making that list of, okay, what's worked for me in the past to get a new customer, get a new client, and just make a list of it. And then make a list of everything that hasn't worked and stop doing that. Like if you're not getting anyone from Twitter, stop focusing on Twitter. Or if you're, if your target market is on Facebook. Don't be on Twitter. So just kind of looking at that and focusing in on what has made you money and just repeating it over and over again. That's what I would do.
It almost sounds like it harkens back to what I said when we were talking about the negative thoughts. I said that the first key is awareness and monitoring your thoughts. So we were talking about then, but kind of the same thing is to be able to know what those profitable things are. You have to pay attention and measure and again we go back to this word results to pay it. And I know I'm probably not. A lot of people are also guilty of this, not maybe tracking or paying attention to what's not. But I guess that's key.
Yeah, you have to pay attention to what's making you money. Otherwise, you're just sending your energy out there to do some of everything.
Right.
And you're not really knowing, okay, what is this bringing back to me? What is this doing for me? So you have to figure out a way to track it. And for me, it was easy when I was a health coach because I did a workshop, I got clients.
Right.
I wrote an article, I had clients. So that was easy. When you're doing something like ebooks and things like that, it can be a little more difficult to track it. But if you're online, I mean, using Google Analytics and using different programs like this can really help you track. Like right now for my blog, I see that, okay, for me, Twitter does gets me 2 times as much traffic as Facebook. Oh, cool. So I spend my time on Twitter and I just automate Facebook. So just kind of looking at those sort of things to say, okay, where should my energy go? Because it's not going to go into Twitter and Facebook and Pinterest and LinkedIn and all these things, because then you'll go nuts. Or I would.
Absolutely. No, this is great advice, and even something that I probably need to pay attention to. And there was an interview.
I'm giving advice to myself. That's what's happening.
I know part of being a teacher is just you learn things and then you teach things that you need to incorporate in your own life. Oh, that's so true. You know?
It's so true.
But there was I don't remember what number it was, but I interviewed a guy named Steve Scott, and there was 2 topics that we talked about a lot. One was ebooks and the Kindle. He's like really big on the writing Kindle ebooks and has had a lot of success with that. But half of that interview was about he's also like this productivity guy, and he had a ton of great advice on how to stay focused and all that. So I'm sorry I don't know the episode number right in front of me, but look up my interview with Steve Scott for more on how to be more effective with your time. This is great. Let's go on to another question here. It's a 3-part question, and it's about advice to your younger self. And I know you're already fairly young to begin with. I guess your early 30s. Yep. And so I don't know, you can pick what age you want to, have this, but if you could go back in time and have a conversation with a younger version of Laurel, maybe as you were maybe about to quit your job, and you gave yourself 3 pieces of advice saying, coming back from the future, these are the things that I recommend you do the same because they worked, they were effective. These are the things that I recommend that you avoid because I was misguided in pursuing them and they were time wasters. Don't go there. And then 3, here's something that was really good that if I'd known better, I would have brought it into the mix earlier. So we'll just take them one at a time. But speaking to your younger self, what would you do exactly the same?
Yeah, how long do we have, Bob? Because this is going to take a while.
We'll just kind of knock them out here, but yeah.
All right, I'll try to kind of narrow it down. I think for me, what worked for me, and I think I talked about this before, was just diving in and just starting something. I mean, that's something, as I talked about, that's been really kind of, organic for me, just to get going on something and start. And I've heard a lot of business owners say that if they had known how hard it was going to be before they started, they probably would have never done it. Right. So I think that's really interesting. I don't think I'm that way. I like the hard work and I appreciate, kind of everything that's involved in there. But I think what works for me too is that really I'm the person, I feel like in my engineering degree is that I learned how to learn. So I felt like I came out of there and I was like, whatever I need to know, I can learn it. I didn't know how to blog. I didn't know anything about WordPress. I didn't know anything about podcasting last year, but I have the ability to learn what I need to learn. And that's something for me is just being a lifelong learner. So that's something that's really worked for me, is just diving in, starting something, and using each thing as a stepping stone and not waiting for the perfect idea. Because even though I told you I was kind of delaying on my photography and saying, no, I can't do that now. And no, I don't, it's not right now. I still don't think I could have gone from being an engineer to being a photographer because I feel like I needed those other stepping stones in there. And I feel like so many people wait for the perfect idea and the perfect time and for all the stars to align and a unicorn to come down and tell you what you're supposed to be doing,
Rainbows and everything.
rainbows and the earth to shake and all of this stuff. And when you just have to start where you are and make your best decision and do it, and then if it doesn't work out, take the next step and the next step. So that's something that's really worked for me along the way, is not trying to wait for that perfect idea and just going with what I have and making the decision with the information that I have at hand.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. It's all about, comes back to taking action. And I love the thing that, yeah, you knew that whatever you needed to learn or you needed to know, you could learn it, and having that confidence, and whether school did that or it's in your DNA, again, that's a great trait to have. So that's what you would do the same. What would you tell your younger self to completely avoid because it didn't work out? What were the time wasters?
Oh dear.
No, it's only an hour show or less.
I know. I was saying we need a lot of time for this. I think for me, even though I believe that I was on the right path every step of the way and I was following my guidance and internal path and all of that, I would go back and I would not have started a business with so much overhead.
Yeah.
And even though I probably wouldn't have listened to myself at the time because I was really dead set on what I wanted to do, I talked about losing over $100,000, and a lot of other people have gone through that as well, and losses through their business and things not working out. And it can be really painful, but I didn't know there was like other kind of businesses to pursue, if that makes sense. Like I didn't know I could be a blogger or podcaster or be a coach. Like none of that really occurred to me. I don't know why. It just wasn't on my radar at the time. So I'd probably go back to myself and say, hey, maybe you should start an online clothing store, or maybe you should start something where you don't have to pay $5,000 a month in rent, plus utilities, plus get employees, plus have all the inventory and all of this. So I think that's a big thing for me. And I think also is setting up my business around my life and not my life around my business. That's something for me. Like I quit my job because I hated being there from 8 to 5, and it's beautiful outside and the leaves are turning color, and I am sitting at my desk, and I didn't get to set my own schedule, and I didn't feel like I had the freedom to live my life. And then I opened this retail store with a ton of overhead, and you have to be at a retail store from the hours you set. So you're still in the same situation. And that's something that I totally missed, is I didn't look at what do I want my ideal day to look like? I looked at, okay, what are my passions? What are my talents? What am I good at? What can I do? And the retail store really spoke to all of that. But the ideal day that I wanted to have, which is working for myself, probably staying in my pajamas, I'm going to admit that, working from home, I didn't factor that in. And I would definitely go back and tell myself, like, hey, maybe you should try to start a different sort of business that plays more to who you are and how you want to live your life.
That's great. That's great points. And I too, yeah, would never be attracted to a retail type of thing, or even an office and managing staff and all this stuff. And I think there is sort of probably a myth that's still out there that to start your own business or to branch out on your own, that it's an expensive process and you need to invest in all this stuff. And it really, these days in particular, that is not the case. And so I'm glad that you pointed that out. And so how about good stuff that you would have earlier if you had to do it all over again, or recommend to your younger self?
I love that question. And I think for me is I would have focused more on the online portion of my business and started definitely creating more content. Is I remember when I started my retail store, I was somewhere I'd read something about backlinks and kind of all this stuff that's almost second nature right now. And I was like, no, I don't need to worry about that stuff. And I didn't really think about using my website and using the internet as a tool to create more income, to reach more people. It was just kind of like my website was there in each of my businesses up until the last few years to look pretty. It was just kind of like a pretty little facade of what my business does. And it kind of gave you a little information. It had terrible copy on it. You would never go there and think, yay, I want to spend money with Laurel. It was just, and I think that was me from a design photography element. I thought if I put some good pictures on there and stuff that people would kind of get what I was trying to do. So I think that's what I would have added to the mix a little earlier is creating content that entices people, that brings people your way, brings you more business, creating a website that has good copy, that shares with people what you do, that sells your business for you, because your website's working for you 24/7. All day long, when you're asleep, when you're out at the movies, when you're doing whatever. And if you can optimize that and have it, whatever business you're in, I mean, whether you're a coach, whether you're selling products online, whatever you're doing, if you can optimize it and have it sell for you, you're way ahead of the game. And I think that's what I would have done a lot sooner.
Yeah.
And I think the big buzzword now is passive income.
Yes.
I mean, that's what you're hearing everywhere. And I think every business can do this is whatever business you're in, use your knowledge to create things that you can sell online through passive ways. And then you have multiple streams of income coming into your business. And that's something that I didn't ever consider before and something I would have gone back and just hit myself over the head and said, do this. So that was something that I would definitely do and recommend for everybody else, even if you haven't done it by now, like get started creating those multiple streams of income into your business.
Awesome. Good stuff. And even though, you pointed out some things that you did wrong with the website, at least you took action, you got a result, and you made it better. You didn't wait to launch your website until it was perfect or you knew exactly what you were doing. You did get it out there.
True. I wouldn't have a website if that was the case.
If you were waiting. So that is awesome. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Laurel, we are in the stretch here. This is a question that always I think is just fascinating. It seems like such a simple question, but it's always very revealing, and I'm always surprised by the answer. And that is, can you name a book that changed your life? So what would that book be, and explain why it did so?
Well, that's a great question. And I know you probably get a ton of different answers. And I don't think I'd pick a business book for this. I would go with The Four Agreements by Miguel. I don't know how to say his name. Ruiz.
I think it's Don Miguel Ruiz.
Ruiz. Okay. Yes. So have you read this book?
I have it in my home. And it's funny that Carrie Cole, who I interviewed recently, mentioned that she actually created a music album years ago with that was inspired by the messages in that book. She befriended him, and I'm familiar with it. And we touched on some of the points in it, but everybody's experience with it will be different. So don't feel bad that it was mentioned before. But how did it impact you?
Well, I feel like it's really an amazing book that I think not only entrepreneurs should read, but I really think everybody should read it because it affected me in my business life and also in my personal life. And the book is really about mapping out a road to personal and emotional freedom. And he does that by spelling out 4 different agreements or kind of like rules to live your life by. Mm-hmm. And the 4 rules that he talks about are: be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. So as you can imagine, that really can play a role in your everyday personal life and also in your business life. And for me, what it did was, and the only way I can kind of explain this is through an analogy. I felt like before I read the book, I was kind of like this little tree without very strong roots. And every time the wind would blow, I would just flop over. And I was just really affected by other people and external circumstances. And when something went wrong in my business, when something went wrong in my personal life, I was just falling over. And after I read the book, I felt like I just got a root system.
Wow.
And I just grounded myself and became like just a stronger tree, even though this might sound a little weird, but I just kind of grew. And then when the wind blows, like I just stand still and the storm happens and I'm still me and I'm still focused and grounded. And that's been a huge change for me because I feel like before I was just following my emotions around like a sheep.
Hmm.
And wherever my emotions went, I would get upset, I would get happy and sad. And, I was just all over the map, to be honest. And gaining the emotional freedom from this book and really going by these rules just means taking 100% control of your destiny, of your life, of your business, of your emotions. And I felt like he really gave me a roadmap to do that in a way that I'd never read before. So it's been a huge impact on me and just turning those failures into learning experiences and having success and working better with other people and stop relying on other people for your own happiness and just creating and designing the life that you want. So I feel like that book, you might not get, like everyone that reads it might not get all of that out of it, but
Right.
it was like the first stepping stone to take me on the journey where I learned all of these things. So that's why it stuck out to me as like one of the most important books that I've read.
That's awesome, and I yeah, I've definitely been devouring sort of self help, personal development stuff since the '70s. And actually, the first book that I discovered that had was so impactful was Wayne Dyer's very first major book. It was called Your Erroneous Zones. Came out like we're talking like I probably read it in '77, '78, something like that. I mean, we're going back a few years, but I've noticed having devoured this stuff over the decades that a lot of people are. I mean, even going back to the Bible and ancient, Sanskrit. I mean, people have been preaching the similar message, similar concepts for centuries, and so but the reason that there's always room for new books and new voices is because people are discovering these things for the first time, and you have to discover what. Like there's a slogan: when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And
Mm-hmm.
you had to hear it through his book. For somebody else, they'll hear it through mine, or they'll hear it from Tony Robbins or whatever. And so I think it's wonderful that there are always authors out there getting these messages out. And so keeps yeah. And I recommend people be open to receiving this whatever these like classic timeless principles, and get it from whatever source makes sense to them.
Yeah, and it opens a doorway. There's always that one book or that one blog or something like that that just opens a doorway to a whole new world.
Right.
And I felt like that too when I got online and I started blogging and podcasting and all of that. It was like this whole new world that I'd
Right.
never discovered. And it just takes kind of one little point or one book or one blog post or something to just help you open that door into that world. And this was that book for me. And it's going to be different for every single person. But I think just being open, as you said, to me, to finding it. And for me, like I found this book because the word freedom had always been something that was on my mind. Like I remember when I was working a corporate job and I literally wrote it on the side of my arm one day because I was so miserable and I was just trying to like focus on like I am free even though I'm shackled to this job
Right.
and I remember one of my coworkers saying something about it. And so that word was always really important to me. And then I go and years later, I go in the bookstore and Borders bookstore, and there's the Four Agreements, and it's talking about personal freedom, and it's sitting right there on the table and it's on sale. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is like what I've been missing. Like it was
Wow.
just kind of all came together for me then. And so that goes along with what you're saying is
Right.
like being open to these things and picking up on the signs that different things are coming to you. So I think that's a really good point.
That's awesome. So, boy, we've got a great. This has been so. You've hit on so many excellent points for anyone at any age pursuing anything, to make their lives better and more fulfilling. So I know you're still, early in your big life journey here, and so and I know we've covered some, podcasting, the photography, and everything, in the health coaching and all that. But what's on the horizon? What do you, as you look ahead in the near future? What's your big, hairy, audacious goal coming up for you?
Well, I think for me is the photography is going great. So that's, I always have that and I'm always doing that. But so I'm trying to grow the blog and podcast, Go Fire Yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, my main goal right now, and it's a big one, is to actually write a physical book.
Wow.
So not an ebook, because I've done that, but to actually write the Go Fire Yourself book. And a lot comes up when you try to put yourself out there and do that, because it's not like, oh, I'll write a book and it'll take X number of hours and then it'll be done and I'll publish it. And there's a lot of fear and doubt, and is this going to be good? And, all of that comes up. So that's my big goal now. So I've started my book, and I've been working on it for the last several weeks, and it's going to evolve as I go along. But it's my big thing right now. So I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about sharing it because I'm just trying to think of ways to share this message. I mean, with what you're doing with the DIY career manifesto, is just in a forum and sharing it with people in a way that they can absorb it and then take their life to the next level. So that's what I'm trying to do with this new book.
That's very, very cool. And I assume it's going to be on a Go Fire Yourself theme. Is that?
Yes, it'll probably be called Go Fire Yourself.
Okay, cool. That's perfect. You've got a perfect vehicle to promote it and spread the word and all that good stuff.
Exactly.
And so where can people find you online, whether it's the podcast or your photography or whatever, wherever you want to send people? Where can they go?
Yeah, they can go to gofireyourself.com. So pretty easy there. And there's a link also to my photography site on there under the About page if you want to check out what I'm doing there. If you're in Nashville, if you're a musician, you need some I'm your person. So, but otherwise the podcast is on that website. The blog is on there. There's a lot of great stuff, info, just all kinds of stuff to help you take the leap and quit your job forever. Like, I'm not talking about quit your job for the next 6 months. I'm talking about never looking back. That's what I'm all about. And following your passion and going on this journey to create this life for yourself. So that's what it's all about.
Well, awesome. Well, you are an inspiration, Laurel. It's been I'm so thrilled that we got to meet a month or so ago in Nashville. And thank you for reaching out first and inviting me to be a guest on your podcast. And it was obvious to me that you were the perfect guest to hear from on the Creative Entrepreneur, doing our thing and being shining examples for other people on how to live a fulfilling life.
Well, thanks, Bob. I love what you're doing as well. I think it's fantastic. I love this show that you're doing, and you're right on the same wavelength as me. So I just think it's fantastic. So thanks for having me.
You are welcome. That was a pleasure. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll be back again real soon. Of course, you can find it now on iTunes. And in addition, the same way you can find Go Fire Yourself, but also on YouTube and at the DIYcareermanifesto.com. But thanks for listening. This is Bob Baker saying so long for now. Yeah, okay, if you're ready.
I am ready. Yeah, stretch it out.
There were sometimes in the middle that I realized my neck is really, but I don't feel like doing this, so maybe I should do
I know. I hear you. Well, I get really tense, because I'm into it, and then I realize I've thrown out my back the next day or something.